All right, dramatic countdown is over. Andrea Avery, thank you so much for coming on today. So we're moving right into it here. You and I obviously were just conversating. I don't even know what words come into my mind right now. Chatting, conversing, but kind of bringing me through the entire Andrea Avery experience of what we're
Wow.
teaching, why teaching sucks, why it's fun, different ways of doing the teaching at the college level, marketing, stand-up comedy. I guess we'll kind of start strong here. And recently, shameless plug for you here of Sex Ed with Miss Avery. How does the road kind of lead to that? What's the inspiration for what you're trying to do there? And other than Hitler getting syphilis potentially, what are some things that you're discovering and kind of going through that?
Well, so I've had
Mm-hmm.
Canadian education my whole life. I went to Canadian university and whatnot. So I've gotten sex ed throughout the whole public system. And, I got sex ed from my parents and we were just obsessed with sex like growing up. I don't know, like we
Okay.
were like in puberty and everything like that. And I realized that, so I took this education, then I taught it. I've taught sex ed for years at different grade levels. And also well, I don't know if this is the most appropriate place to talk
Let's
about
go
it.
for it. Let's go for it.
I mean, I'm sexually active. I don't know. Sex
Yes.
is a big part of my life, I guess. I like so this whole thing I decided a way to blend education,
Mhm.
sex,
Mhm.
and my favorite topics, comedy, and get to chat with awesome friends and reminisce and whatnot. So it's Sex Ed with Miss Avery, the past, present, and future of Canada's sexual education.
Mr. Clark After Dark is brought to you by Luxy. That's Luxy. Luxy is the standard for modern dating as it gives you a greater understanding of any potential match's intentions and background before you make your move. Swiping endlessly in other dating apps can be exhausting and often leave you with only the leftovers in your dating pool. Luxy is an exclusive platform with just a 10 to 15% acceptance rate, as well as a profile and income verification feature so you can be confident you're only connecting with those who meet your high standards. The community guidelines emphasize safety, trust, and equality by strictly prohibiting scams, explicit content, and harassment. 2025 is your year to stop settling. With Luxy, there is no luck involved, just real connections with people who truly match what it is you are looking for. Download the Luxy app today to see if you qualify for a better chance at finding the right person for you. And now, back to the show. Beautiful. And I have to say, I think it's kind of funny. Like I was raised very kind of small town Christian, and it was always very hush hush in the household of like we don't talk about that here. And God forbid you bring that up, Hitler having syphilis around their grandparents. That's not gonna go well at all. And I just think it's kind of funny that like as you're talking about that, again, like I'm an educator, we kind of go through like the liberal arts process of trying to free our minds, but even inside I'm like, oh my goodness, like who's gonna hear us like talking about this like absolute taboo? So I guess
This thing that's going to happen to us all, this thing that,
why we are all here.
why we're all here, and the thing that is so guarded, so taboo,
Mm-hmm.
so ooh, but we all found out somehow. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you grew up in small town Christian, whatever. I bet you have some great stories about the first time you found out what a condom was, your
Yeah.
first sex ed class. I bet
Yeah.
you I would love if you would come and do my
As
content project because I would love to hear a boy from Fort McMurray.
Yeah, the small town Kings Point stories are definitely real. I'm not sure how much I would be able to share publicly, but I guess for you for teaching, how do you try to push like what are the boundaries and what are you trying to push when you're teaching, I guess, with sexual education specifically?
Well, it depends on what my audience is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Context is important.
Mm-hmm.
And I've taught, ages 3 to, people in their 70s. Like I've taught all
Mm-hmm.
age ranges. So when we talk about something, the boundaries around talking about sex ed or I mean, let's even think about math, right? When I'm talking about math with a 3-year-old, it's very different than when I'm talking math about it with a 20-year-old, or the idea that what we're, these overarching themes, I'm going to have different boundaries at different levels.
Yeah. And I've even noticed too, especially in Alberta, where I've just maybe escaped from, for lack of a better word,
You
is
got out.
I got out. I found a way. Apparently,
You
you
were
don't die
landlocked and
when you
everything, and you
leave.
did it.
Yeah, I'll just like go out of Irving Nature Park and try to sail away if anything ever happens to me here in St. John. But for like it's very weird. Like everyone makes it very weird, like weirder than it needs to be. And like I remember, like I have 2 older brothers. So I mean, the jokes around sexual education, I knew all about it before my grade 5 2-day plan where they took all the boys into one room, all the girls into the other room, and then they're like, this is what a fallopian tube is. And we're like, oh my God, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. So I guess, why do you think that, I guess the running joke is it's 2025. Like, what are the things that we're still kind of not letting go of? Like, the kids are all doing it. I mean, if every teacher, I guarantee every teacher who teaches at least grade 7 or 8 or above hears a story they don't want to hear just in passing, right? But what's kind of circulating on Snapchat. So I guess, what are we getting wrong about how we're trying to figure out the best way to deliver this information to the kids?
Yeah, well, I think actually, I mean, what are we getting wrong? I think we've come a long way. Yes. Honestly. So, one of my favorite comedians is Fortune Feimster, and she has a great joke that, like, we could type out 80085 on our calculator and see the word boobs and freak out over it and probably get detention over it if we were like did it too much and whatnot. And kids today can pull up their phones and see as many pictures of breasts and you know what I mean? Content is there. Kids are going to find out. And so I think that having a plan, a strategy, some thought about it before it ends up on your lap is really important. I was teaching grade 4 in Slave Lake, and I had a little girl start her period. We didn't start talking about puberty yet. So what does that little girl think? So the idea then, and girls are starting their periods earlier. It's something that they've noticed, and so the idea that, or maybe it wasn't reported, who knows, but if you're not going to learn about it until the public school system sanctions that it's okay to learn about it, then that's an issue. So I think a lot of sex ed doesn't happen in school. And it happens out in the world. And so if we shy away from these topics, I think that's where we're doing harm. And but we've come a long way. I had a great conversation today with my best friend about how when she was a little girl, she was sick, and her aunt said, "Oh, did you toss your cookies?" And cookie is what she referred to as her vagina. Like growing up, that was what they called it. Yeah. Like they've never said the word toss your. So she heard that and didn't understand. You know what I mean? So like the idea that,
I don't know what it means, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, toss your cookies means to puke. So to hear that saying and be like, I didn't toss anything. What? So
nothing has been tossed.
Nothing has been tossed. So it's just I don't know. It's wild the rate that these things are available. So we can't keep our head in the sand anymore. And if we do, that's where the issue is. So I think we've come a long way.
Yes, I think so too, because I do think that there was a student I had last year, and he said like the most hilarious phrase that no one is really, again, I'm speaking very generally here, but even those who are kind of Christian or religious, they're like loosely Christian, like in Newfoundland, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, was like, Pentecost women aren't allowed to drink or smoke, but Lord knows they loves to poke. So that was always kind of like the classic line for, okay, like we kind of pretend we're this certain kind of person like in front of the family, and then we kind of veer off and do our own thing all the time. But he said like he kind of made that loosely Christian point. And I do think for the most part, it's almost like we figured out that, okay, when the kids are kind of between the ages of kind of 8 and 10, they're kind of they're introduced to like the biology of sex, and I guess increasingly into like gender expression and those types of ideas. I think, and obviously that's two separate debates, but just for like the sexual education to begin with, I feel that we have gotten more comfortable with the introduction, but now you hear the stories of kids who are 5 or in grade 5 and 6 and like are addicted to pornography, and they're watching it on their phones every single night and it's almost this, like, I'm trying to think of what to compare it to. It's like we know what's happening, but we pretend it's not. It's almost like processed food in our foods. It's like we're eating, like we know this is healthy. Like there's definitely no like weird pesticides on this, and we're not going to get cancer from it. I guess like what are your thoughts on that? Do you kind of agree with that?
Like this kind of knowing ignorance, or this like
it's almost like another like a
willingness to
Yeah, like we've figured out that like yes, as a kind of collective, kind of regardless of belief, there should be this biological introduction. But now we kind of have the like kind of an inability to grapple with the kind of rapid access to pornography. That's kind of, I guess, what I'm veering into. Like there's kind of a lack of emphasis on that. Would you kind of what are your thoughts there?
Well, I don't know if I know exactly what you're asking, but I don't know. I'll jump like back, when you're talking about like kind of moving away from like maybe a more Christian
Hmm.
narrative. I think
Hmm.
that's a really big part of it. I didn't actually realize until I started chatting with comedians all over Canada about how they learned about, you know, sex ed, puberty, things like that. And so many people were like, "Well, I was in a Catholic school. Well, I'm Catholic. Well, my mom's Catholic." So like
Yeah.
that came up so much, like crazy. And so, or like I was learning this, but my buddy who was Catholic was learning that. So like there's so many examples like that that came up when I was talking to it. So I think religion had a big part in it. But I think I don't know. Yeah, I feel like you could write a really cool like society or like a sociology paper about this, like just like the speeds in which, and trying to keep up with things
Hmm.
and how we learn and how like we just had no idea what, I don't know. I feel like there's a cool social thesis in here somewhere.
Yeah, and 'cause I always thought it was funny because another one of the classic jokes from I don't know if it was my family, but like the when you would ask where do babies come from, my
Yes.
grandparents would say, "Oh, they come from the tree stumps." Like out in the yard. We're like,
What?
what? Like, what does that even
That is
what does that
so
even mean?
good. I see.
Maybe there's like
I
a
need
tree
to
of
have you
life
on
thing there.
mine.
Okay,
That's
sure.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and like even I don't know. So I grew up Catholic. I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but like even the idea, I remember asking my mother what a virgin was in like grade 3 because I kept
Like
hearing
we
about
don't talk
Virgin
about
Mary,
Mary here.
right? But it's just like I don't know. Even the idea, well, then what's a virgin? Oh, well, it's someone trying to explain to a child what a virgin is. Oh, someone who's pure, whatever. Well, then think about that child if they were to be sexually assaulted or something like that. Am I not pure now? There's all these like possibilities of, because we keep it so secret, all these potential for shame and for misunderstandings and for I don't know, all of these potentials for negative outcomes. I just think the more we shed light on things, the more we talk about things at a developmentally appropriate level.
Yeah.
Context is important, I think that's honestly, I think the best route.
Well, yeah, because I remember hearing this kind of argument about I can't remember where, but it was like the idea of like that virginity was attached with loss. Like, why is it like the first time you do that? Like, why? Like it sounds like you lose something. Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
really make sense. Like, what is it that you're losing, rather than like kind of like transitioning into a new stage of life? Like, it's kind of like a weird twist on like the like a kind of the shame attached to it. Like, I still think that's very much a part of it
Yeah.
now. But then it's
Well,
almost weird.
shame
Like
is
on the
so part of control, right?
yeah.
And when we're shameful and we're nervous and we're embarrassed and all these different things, we're quiet, we're closed off, and we're easier to control. We're more malleable. I think that what you're saying, like the idea of loss. I mean, that's so interesting when you consider that, like, the hymen is like,
Hmm.
has nothing to do with virginity.
Hmm.
And I know lots of people who have never put, a penis into a vagina, but
Hmm.
aren't virgins. So
Yes. Yeah.
it just means nothing. It's this
Yes.
archaic understanding that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and I don't know. Have you ever noticed much about like the difference in how like boys and girls are educated on sexual education? Like, has there ever kind of been expectations placed on you for that? Because I've never taught it myself. When I was doing my practicum, my mentor teacher, which was hilarious because my mentor teacher was actually my former grade 9 teacher. So she put, I think, the condom on like a Gatorade bottle when
Oh
I
my
was in grade
God.
9. So she did it again when I was like her practicum student with the grade
What
9 students.
flavor
And
of
I was like,
Gatorade? No, I'm kidding. Sorry. That's not funny.
"Ah, it was empty actually." So I don't
Okay.
know. But anyway,
Sorry. It's important to the story.
very important. But I guess it was, but they were being taught as a class. So I guess, is it still like the idea where that's separated? Is that the expectation in your experience for, because again, it's been 18 years since I was taught, right? So I'm not
Yeah.
really sure what has really changed in the expectation for the delivery of that education.
Well, I'm going to say, well, sex education became mandated in Canada in the 80s. And
Mhm.
then, so, I would say, as, I was born in 87, when I would have taken sex ed, first starting with good touch, bad touch, and, at
Mhm.
age 6 and things like that. And then moving into puberty and then moving into sex and STIs and da da da.
Mhm.
I think as soon as we got to, I would say in the 90s, the aughts, till very recently, I would say right up until grade 6 when you start to actually learn about, well, grade 4 is puberty. I say maybe up to grade 4.
Mhm.
Any type of, good touch, bad touch, body cleanliness, all those early ideas,
Mhm.
maybe anatomy, learning,
Okay.
anatomically correct words. All of that would have been done together and then split as soon as puberty gets hit in about grade 4. And that kind of seems standard across Canada.
Mhm.
And then from the curriculums I'm reading and from when. Now, I would say but I can only speak to my experience, having taught it at a few different schools, it's been up to the instructor. Like, so the teacher, if they're comfortable, but I would say I always opted to teach them together. But when we covered the more nitty-gritty topics, puberty and sex and things like that, I liked having somebody who had the experience with a penis there.
Fair
Because I
enough.
can't,
Yeah.
and I learned things like where I'm in the class going, really?
It's like a vast deference. What?
Like what? Like you what? And then it just helped because I couldn't answer those questions, but I really didn't think they should be separated. I think there's so many
Yeah.
reasons they shouldn't be separated like that.
Yeah.
Um, you
What
know,
are
it,
some of the? Sorry, I did interrupt you there, but did you ever do like the question boxes?
yeah.
Like what were some of the most like arguably unhinged or even like surprising questions? So I feel like that would be an entertaining part of it, but
It was the best. So the number one thing that would come up was about hair. Hair was huge. Like there were so many questions about hair.
Mhm.
There were so many questions about periods and tampons specifically. I think tampons really
Okay.
blow, like especially a boy. I remember this little guy being like, he was sitting front row, and he's just like, "So where does the tampon go?" Like he just couldn't quite
He's
grasp
like,
it.
I think I know what I'm saying,
Like
but
I think it goes, and so I think that like those are the big one. Hair was a big one. Yeah, periods were a big one. Lots of questions about masturbation. That was a big one, which shocked me because I feel like we were too shy and nervous to even
that's
talk
fair
about,
enough because sometimes
right?
you gotta respect the kid's ability to just be like, I'm just gonna put this out there. And so I guess, are they like concerned of like doing too much? Is it just like, is it shameful to be doing it? Like what's usually the kind of concern, I guess, over it?
The concern was like, do we have to? That was the question. It kind of seems
Okay.
like maybe like because I thought about it. I was like, I
Hmm.
wonder why they would ask that. Do I have to
Yeah.
masturbate? And it's
Yeah.
like, obviously they're too young to be interested in it. This kid asking is obviously too young
Yeah.
to be interested in it. But I bet has older kids maybe joking about it.
Even siblings
So
too. Like, yeah.
siblings, whatever,
My
right?
yes. A lot of
Yeah.
stories from my brothers. Maybe I'll expose them instead of myself.
Do it, yeah. This is so when I got into sex ed with Miss Avery, I started just posting videos from comedians because I was like, oh, let's expose their stuff before I start exposing mine.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who's a sex therapist in Halifax who still does the question box, but with adults. And I think she said it's her favorite part too. Like just the questions are so fun.
Yeah. And especially too, like what is, I guess, like what are they kind of concerned about when it comes to hair? Because I think I know, like I've heard some people talk about like in like the 80s and 90s and even 2000s, like it wasn't necessarily the norm to kind of be this like clean shaven thing, and now that kind of is that pretty much it? Like is it like an armpit hair thing too? Is
It was an
it?
armpit hair thing. It was, yeah, genital hair. Like
Mhm.
I think questions about shaving it was stressing some kids out.
Okay.
What
Oh,
if I
like
don't
not knowing
have
actually how to. Okay,
how to
that makes sense.
remove it? How, like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then why do we have hair in these certain areas? Because I feel like there is kind of a trend. I'm gonna say, like, I have a lot of friends who don't shave their armpits anymore. Do you know what I mean? Or shave their legs and stuff anymore. And so this idea of maybe pushing back against societal norms, and so maybe some curiosity around that, like why do people have to shave their? How come guys don't shave their legs and girls do?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I even like I've noticed that as well, and I find when I see like a woman that doesn't shave their legs, like it does. Like, I get surprised by it, but it's like
Same.
but it's always the second. Like it's always your initial judgment, and then it's like who you actually are is kind of like your second thing. It's like, oh, that's cool. Like you do you.
Yeah,
Like
but
that's
it
kind
takes
of
a
my
minute
second.
because
I'm
you
like, whoa,
have,
what's
yeah, you've got like a trained reaction, right? Like,
yes,
but you
yes,
gotta, yeah,
yeah,
talk yourself into it. No, I when I started noticing like a lot of people were doing armpit, I can't have armpit hair because, and I have there's another girl that talked about this, and I was like, oh, that's my whole experience. I love this
yeah,
because I got made fun of for having armpit
oh,
hair,
yeah,
and so now I have like a complex about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I find that's pretty much like nothing's really changed. I think, like I guess even from like 15, 20 years ago, I guess when it comes to the potential shame for like the hair expectations, like it's still pretty much the same questions, because I wouldn't say much has changed like culturally between like the year 2000 and 2025 as it probably was from 1975 to 2000. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
mostly uniform when it
I feel
comes to
like
that.
it's a pendulum and it goes in one, like it's like with everything. I think everything's a pendulum where it goes hard one way, hard another way. And now maybe we're starting to find some even ground where if people don't
Yes.
want to do that. And like, also I was learning recently, because I feel like I'm learning a lot about sex ed because of this whole thing I'm doing, this whole
Yeah.
project. Having like hair on your genitals can help protect you against syphilis, gonorrhea, and getting UTIs. Like there's all these benefits to it that like I didn't know.
Well, it's always weird when like it's natural. Like you have hair there for a reason, and
Yeah.
the hair only comes once you're kind of age to reproduce. So that kind of makes sense why that would
Just
be.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like,
I actually
why
didn't
is
think of
it
that, yeah.
weird? Well, yeah, I was like, why is this a weird thing when it's like
Yeah. And
I'm
why
trying
is
to
it
think of
something that we
the
can't talk about? And why is it something that like, isn't is so shameful? And why do people have it's one thing to have likes and desires, but to like literally have like hard lines about things. And
yeah.
yeah.
I remember like because as we're kind of having this conversation, I'm just kind of reliving my past trauma, of like just like learning through this stuff, and I just remember I feel like I think about the experience as like a collective group of boys learning about a blue waffle when I was like 10 years
What is a
old.
blue waffle? Does it have anything to do with a fart and a fire? Boys are so weird. Okay, what is a blue waffle?
They're so weird. I
I gotta
honestly
know.
could not even tell you. It's like again like
Would it
the
be weird if I Googled really quickly?
not at all. Please
What's
do.
okay? Is my sound still okay?
Live reaction. Yes, your sound is
Urban
fine.
Dictionary,
Yeah.
blue waffle. All
But
right, you
this
ready
was
for this?
like the most, yeah.
Oh, okay. There's a couple of them.
Okay.
Okay. So tell me which one was the one that sorry, just one sec. Enter picture in picture.
This is an unexpected segment on
Okay.
the Mr. Clock After Dark podcast today.
So, which blue waffle? All right, everyone, are you ready, kids?
Yes.
Which blue waffle did you learn about? Okay. When Papa Smurf, I don't want to say half these words.
Well, I'll say I can block them out, whatever word. That's fine. Just say it.
Like, I don't even want to say some of these words. I don't like some of these words. All right. The next one was a derogatory term used for a vaginal infection. However, the
Yes.
infection has nothing to do with the color blue, nor does the vagina actually turn blue.
Yeah, and I think when I almost want to say this was like the beginning of like photo doctoring and Photoshop when I was in like, because I'm 20, almost 28 now. So this is about 18 years ago. This is probably like 2007.
Okay.
And this would have been like right around like when we have like computers at school and like Omegle and kind of all that stuff kind of coming onto the scene. And it almost feels like there were photos that were purposely doctored to be like bluer, I guess, if that makes sense. So that was kind of but again, like that's what stuck in my brain as like part of learning for sex education. But I don't really remember Honestly, I just remember being, maybe it was uncomfortable, but I just remember laughing
Yeah.
nonstop.
How
Like that
funny
was
it was,
just,
right?
it
Like, it
was
was
just like,
so funny. And I remember being in grade 6 and the other class, so the girls and boys were split up, and we were allowed to laugh. We were allowed to whatever. But the boys, if they laughed, they got kicked to the hallway.
well, we
So I remember
Miss
Tyler and
Williams, I
Brad.
remember she taught. So I guess, what do you think about this? Because I remember, shout out Miss Canette. She was my grade 5 teacher, but she didn't teach us sex ed. Like that, they swapped teachers. So we had this kind of older lady, Miss Williams, I was at a Catholic elementary school. Older lady, I can't remember her first name. Lisa? I don't know. Anyway, but like she taught, and it was like, you can't laugh in here. Like, we're not doing
She
this
would let you
game. So,
laugh.
but even more,
But then
that's
you're
just
having
gonna
a
make
church
you want to laugh.
giggle. Yes.
When you've got the Catholic school and the priest in the corner kind of telling you like what you, I don't know. It was
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I learned, but I remember, and this is kind of like what I find interesting about this too. There was a guy I know. I was back in Newfoundland, and I can't tell too much about the story because everyone will know who it is. But we were sitting around a fire, as you do in a small town in Newfoundland, and I was probably like 16, 17, and the topic obviously comes up about, I don't know if it was Blue Waffle conversation or not, but it was like we were just talking about general like things to do with sex, and just like, I don't even know how it came
16-year-old
up.
conversations.
Yes, but he was older than us by, I think, a year or two. So I think he was close to being 18. Like, he knew none of it. He had no idea, like, all these just like facts about like how things happen. I don't even know. Clearly, these conversations don't sound that cool. But I just remember being absolutely flabbergasted by
He hadn't heard
like
any of it.
none of it. And so it's interesting, especially in those smaller contexts, even with the internet, of how sheltered some people still can be. And like, honestly, like how dangerous that is. Like, as you're kind
How
of getting up
incredibly
and
dangerous.
yeah,
Like,
like when you're not understanding what your body is going through. But yeah.
I can't imagine like I don't know what's going to happen in the first experience, and hopefully it's a healthy one for that person, that like, you know, to be able to recognize if that's okay what's happening, and that that's a hard one.
Yeah, and I remember too, my friend group back when I was younger, it was always like, I gotta be careful what I say here. It was always like people at the high school parties are doing the high school party thing, and there's always a pressure to be the next one to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of so I guess, like, what would you say, maybe even in, there's kind of a mixed bag. I feel like you still kind of have your students that are, like, I remember being in grade 7 and hearing like people in my class that had like lost their V card, or
Oh yeah.
I remember the first day of grade 9. Crazy. There was like, I don't know if I've told the story on the podcast or not, but I, again, being my wholesome Christian boy self, I got invited to a party the first week of grade 9, and I was kind of known in Fort Mac as like the pop and chips guy, because I was so scared of my mother to drink that I would not do
That
it.
you would have pop and chips only. That's so
But
cute.
no, I wouldn't bring anything. I would just go, honestly, I kind of always say, like, I always went to every single party in high school. Like, the kind of agreement, if you will, between my mom and I was like, if I don't drink, I can kind of do whatever I want. So that was fun. Like, I was cool
Yeah,
with
you
that.
don't want
Like,
to lose that.
no, like,
Sorry,
to give me
I
their
feel like I
vehicle.
heard on a different podcast that you used to get paid to say bad words or something.
Yes. My friends would be like, I'll literally give you $1 to say the F word. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing
Can't
it.
do it.
Lynette will find out. But no. Yeah. So, but like, I remember going to this party, and it was kind of crazy because I'm thinking, okay, grade 8 wasn't that long ago. It's only 2 months ago. And I don't remember the last birthday party I would have been at before that, but like it was chill. Like, it was like, oh, like we ordered some pizza, hung out, played video games. Like, it wasn't that serious. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't a like drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff going around. And I walk into this party and I'm like, oh my God. And there's like people doing like cocaine on the counter, and there's like people, I'm like, whoa, I am like literally freshly 14 walking into this place. And the person who's hosting this party is also 14. So that's where I'm like, whoa, like I just, so anyway, I walk around. I finally find one of my friends who's like smoking weed in the yard. And I'm like, man, this is nuts. He's like, yeah, he's a guy to come outside to take a break. This is
little
crazy.
overwhelming in there, a little
Yeah, honestly,
overstimulating.
I call my mom. I'm like, I can't be here. I don't know what's happening. You got to get me out of here. Which is honestly sounds very wholesome now, but probably actually just smart to just like, I need to get out of here. I'm like a fresh tween here.
Yeah.
But anyway, the only reason I say that is because I remember after that, this person who kind of hosted that party, like I was pretty good friends with her, and she told me that like she had like lost it that night, like her V card, and I was just like, whoa. It was very much
big
a
deal.
kind of coming, well, not even big deal, but it was like the only deal. You know what I mean? Like this was the only thing kind of on the mind of everyone. So I guess how much has it kind of come up in conversation potentially when teaching sex ed about like the pressure to lose it, to like get rid of it, like your virginity? I'm even kind of dodging the word as I'm saying it. Isn't that kind of funny? Like
The word virginity?
yes, like I'm almost kind of like trying to walk around it. Is that like a weird, probably inner shame thing? Probably.
I wonder
But
what that's about. Yeah,
I
I
know I just
feel
threw a
like
lot at you there, but I'm just kind of running
yeah.
through this kind of narrative of like some kids in the grades 7 and 8 are still kind of doing their thing and like starting to have sex at that age. Then you've got some people who are like 20, 21 and they're like, I haven't lost it. I'm content to keep it. And I'm just going to keep doing my thing too. So yeah, I guess my question would be kind of distill it all down is that still as prevalent as it used to be, do you think? And if not, how have the questions around that kind of changed?
So is what prevalent?
Like, I guess the feeling of the pressure to try to lose your virginity.
To lose your virginity. I would say, yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that the pressure to lose your virginity is way more intense
Interesting.
for kids today. I would say, though, the number one way to battle that is with education and to, to present all the information so that they can make an informed choice. But I can't imagine having to have had to navigate what was going on around, learning about society, learning about how to act and what I believe and what's important to me and all those things with the amount of potentially really damaging information that's out there.
Okay.
So
That's
even when I
fair.
think,
There's like,
yeah, like
the danger of the information age in a sense.
yeah, it's a hard balance. Like, it's one thing that, when we were sitting around, giggling over, oh my gosh, this girl's, she started her period and da da da, and I haven't started mine yet, but I have 4 hairs here, and da da da. And we're comparing all these things. I swear, we're going nitty gritty, and like we're so fascinated about it. Wouldn't it have been great if we could jump online and Google how fast should and just know that we feel normal? On the other side of it, as soon as I type that in, like something about pubic hair or whatever, I'm also being bombarded with, here's
Kinda like
an
targeted ads and
advertisement
stuff.
of
Yeah.
here's an advertisement of why you should get rid of all your hair, and here's the 8 different products that you should buy to do it, and here's how Kim Kardashian keeps hers, and if you like, or Taylor Swift does hers, and the amount of information that is meant to cause shame and to like I
Literally
just can't imagine having
capitalize on shame.
capitalize on
Yeah.
shame. Exactly. So, and then also there's, all the misinformation out there, and then you're also getting into, user generated content, and then also really technical information that may be way over their head. So I just can't imagine having to navigate finding the information in today's world. I think it's really interesting. It'll be really interesting to talk to a 16-year-old in 10 years, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And find out, so what was it like,
Yeah.
because
Like what
most
was
of the people
the
I talked to didn't have a computer in their house.
and that's the thing, even from like when I was younger at that time, like I was still fighting with my brothers over who got to play RuneScape on the family computer. Like that was the whole thing. I remember,
Yeah.
oh my God, I have so many embarrassing stories. I can't tell that story.
No, tell
Okay.
it.
No, like I remember I looked up a website on, I was such an innocent child. So bad. Like I literally, I can't. I just don't want any of my students to listen to this.
I get it. Yeah.
No,
I'm
I
sure.
know. But like the classic part was like you can scroll through most social media apps now and stumble upon it by accident. You know what I mean? That's also different in the sense of like I had to go onto the desktop when no one was home and like type in what I want to look at and like look at
Yeah.
like
Yes,
making sure no one was
exactly.
there.
And have like another window open that you could click onto really quickly. Like you had to be
Oh,
stealthy.
so I'm gonna throw my brothers under the guns here. Like they would, my brother caught my other brother looking at like www.bigguns.com because it was like for
I was
obviously
looking
for
at gun.
boobs, and it was like, no, it's for guns. What are you talking about? Like it was accident. But again,
Sorry.
those are also like hilarious coming of age moments. It's not, but now it's almost become in a weird way more secretive because now you can take your phone and like
Yeah.
like you
Watch the
can
most graphic,
yeah
unfiltered,
yeah
demoralizing, like
yeah
horrible representations of sexuality.
yes, and it's almost like I've heard a lot about like, I'm trying to think of like other podcasters I've listened to talking about how like in a weird way or in actually kind of the way it's intended to be is like pornography is a very unrealistic expectation as for what a like an actual sexual relationship is like, and that I think it was Andrew Huberman actually, he was talking about there was a like you learn to only be like sexually attracted to watching other people do it versus actually you engaging in that activity yourself with another individual, which is I think for the most part, I think there's some stats about like people
Doesn't that
like
sound accurate though? Like
yes, and it also makes sense that
it makes so much sense to me.
well, yeah, and like people are, I think for the most part, people are losing. And that's kind of what I asked earlier because people are losing their virginity and like having first dates like way later in life. Like,
Yeah.
because honestly, it's kind of wholesome when, I mean, not that I was the most like clearly the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like I was a very wild individual as my 14-year-old self tried to leave a party immediately. I'm not doing these drug bad things, but like, yeah, like listening to some of my students who are like in grade 12 and they come in like, Mr. Clark, like so and so like kissed this person this weekend, and I'm like, what? Like this is grade 12, like, what are
Really?
you talking about?
That's
Yeah, so
adorable.
that's kind of what I've noticed about
Okay.
somewhat of a like it almost seems like the extremes have gotten more extreme, like the kids who are kind of beginning to engage in that activity when they're kind of 12 and 13 even kind of go like fully into that, where I mean I've heard stories of students who are 13 and 14 and have had like 40 to 50 sexual partners, right? Like
Yeah.
this is just, and honestly like that's, you can talk about like the difference of like sexual expression versus like honestly having healthy sexual boundaries as an individual versus like I mean like I've been with my wife since I was 19 years old, so that's like a different thing. And I think there's also this attack on, I know that makes that kind of feeds right into my small town Christian boy behavior, but I just think that it's almost even more complicated now. I don't even really have like an area I'm trying to go there, but I guess what are your
I think
thoughts
it
there?
is. I think it's so nuanced. I think it's so deep. And I think just even having these kinds of conversations, I mean,
Mhm.
you're, I hope I'm not out. Am I allowed to say anything about the announcement you just put
Yes,
out?
yeah, you're all
Like, you've
good. Yeah.
got a little one on its way and
Yeah, and
a
it didn't come from the
little
tree
guy.
stump,
It
so
didn't come from the tree
yeah.
stump, and there were no birds and no bees involved. And eventually you're going to have to, work through this information with your own little and decide
Yes.
when and how and all these different things. And but if you just don't think about it, touch it, whatever,
Mhm.
I think it's doing a disservice, in the same way that you guys are probably thinking about, where's the best place to put the crib so that light doesn't come in here and da da da. Like the same way that you're planning those things, you also kind of
Yeah.
have to think about, there are unsafe people out there. There are unsafe situations, and we have to learn how to be able to have body autonomy and know what's feels good and what feels wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm even thinking too, because my dear niece is very near and dear to my heart, and she's turning 9 in November. But for the first time, like even though like I don't have any kids yet, like our kid's coming in August. I think we're gonna name him Maxwell. So I'm thinking of him like Maxwell. Like my niece is literally going to be going through this next year. She's now going into grade 4 here in the fall. And I can almost tear up thinking about her already being in that stage of life, but it's also at the same time like how do we not how do we set her up to have a healthy relationship with who she is and like not, I think the knee-jerk reaction is to repress and conceal and to shelter. And I
Keep
think
young,
that's,
keep naive, keep whatever,
yeah,
and I think that's because we're all going to grow. We're gonna
yeah.
develop.
Yes, and I think like I guess so where I'm kind of going is if you could rewrite everything and if we had like the perfect kind of rollout for a sexual education curriculum, I guess like what does that development look like? I guess what do you start to teach beyond potentially just like the simple biology of it to students that maybe we're not allowed to necessarily discuss or in a classroom
Yeah.
setting now?
Yeah, I think that, a big thing to teach is that everything well, and see, it's hard for me to say that. When I got
Mhm.
into this whole thing, I didn't wanna give my opinion on anything.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
wanted to and I do think it's really
What are the
important.
differing opinions then, I guess?
Yeah, I guess, but the more that I get into it, the more that I feel really passionately,
Mhm.
that just, the conversation around it and whatnot is really important, and having the conversation when I say what is the perfect amount, like, I think letting the kid or the student, the uninformed party guide the conversation
Mhm.
is important, and then maybe offering a little one step beyond, like just a little, um if they come to you wondering about, oh, so and so, my teacher's going to have a baby in August, and how did the baby get in her belly and things like that, and then maybe, starting to explain around there, and then offer a little chunk. I always think about teaching as a house and laying that foundation and then putting
Mhm.
on the first floor, and then we don't start with the roof, so the idea of just doing bits at a time and going at their pace.
Mhm.
And
Well, and
so
that's yeah, and it's almost like the classic. This was kind of even before my time of the like you find the nudie mag under the bed, and it's like the
yeah, the cardboard
Playboy, and
box,
that's
yeah.
well, actually no, not necessarily because I remember my friends and I would always go to the Shell gas station, and there would always be I mean it wasn't Playboy, but it was
Like
always in
a
like a
Hustler.
plastic. It was like in a plastic cover too, so you could only look at like the
You couldn't
outside.
open it. How old would you have been?
Oh god, this would have been you're just unlocking everything right now. I probably would have been 11. Had to have been,
Yeah,
like,
that's
between 10 and
probably
12.
yeah, I feel like that's when most guys were telling me that
Yeah.
they were starting to notice all of a sudden notice some girls, you know?
Well, because I remember too, my and so this is kind of interesting. So I remember there was a what was the site called? Was maybe I shouldn't just, like, advertise sites, but there was a site that my okay, there's 2 things. So this is when you have older males in your life, they'll kind of be which is kind of a weird in a sense of like they'll be the ones to kind of introduce you to like these things, but there was always it was like Tila Tequila
Yes.
on channel 19, which was Showcase or something, or no, channel 24, which is always a joke. And that was I remember my parents had like deleted that channel off of our TVs, but if you like put 2, 4 and manually entered it, it would go
You
to
could get to
that
it?
channel.
That's amazing.
I don't know if they knew that or not. I mean, clearly they might have, but I remember there was another time when I think my friend had showed me, or maybe it was my cousin had showed me a website, whatever. It's like a classic kind of just like pictures, whatever.
Yeah.
When I think I showed my friend at home, at my house, and then my brother saw it and told my mom. This is
Ratted
what I
you
mean.
out.
But I remember like the conversation that I had with my mom that night, it was almost like I had like burned the house down. Like it was
Like,
just this
you had done something
feeling.
so wrong.
Well, it was just this like cloak of disappointment and this like thick, tense, like shame in the air of just I can't. And I always kind of joke
Not
that
mad, I'm disappointed.
not even worse than that. It's like you are a sinner. Like
You're a sinner.
you like this is like this is how people go to hell. This is a gateway to others. I don't. I'm not like she didn't say that, but it was always like
But that
a
was the feeling, and that's what
the
you had learned.
feeling. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess how should a parent respond? when inevitably they might stumble upon something the kid maybe didn't realize they left there, or like didn't clear the history or whatever. Like, how should you respond, and what's the conversation like with that kid after? That'll be a conversation I might be having with Max in 10 years.
Maybe, eh?
So it'll definitely probably happen.
I feel like should's a tough one. I just, what should we
you
do?
not do? What should you not do?
Okay, I can maybe, shouldn't do. Evoke shame, I think, is a big one. I think that it's important to have conversations about private activities and public activities. I had a friend with a child that would self-soothe and, inappropriately. And try to do it at school and things like that. Like, that was something they had to work through. So what do you do in that sense, right? Where you're having these conversations about what's appropriate and what's not and things like that. I think, her big thing was she didn't want this little girl to have this shame about feeling pleasure. But there's certain things that happen in the classroom. There's certain things that happen alone in your bedroom. So talking about that and talking about, we talked a little bit about using the proper words for things so that there's no confusion, I think is an important thing, because I think the more we can just, clear up that, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to think too, because kind of the consequence of the information age a little bit is, 200 years ago, like the amount of naked people that you would have the potential to see was like, you could probably count on. I wouldn't even,
like limited,
very, very few. And now you could arguably look at 10,000 in a day if you really wanted to. You know what I mean? So like, what does that do?
Child protection's probably on.
Exactly, right? And it's like, you'll see sometimes it's like like not safer, as safe for work, and which is kind of insane. But I guess, like, how do you? Yeah, I think realistically you can't. I think if you repress it, you're just going to drive them more toward it. I think that's a lesson that we never really learn. Like, I think some things kind of need to be experienced to be learned in that regard. I think you just got to have the conversation about, like, this is what can do, this is when it can be a negative thing. But yeah, it can. I'm definitely not looking forward to that first conversation with Mr. Max. But
why do you think? Why won't you and Maxwell laugh and have jokes about it and have a great chat about it? Why is it such a big freaking deal?
That's true.
Happens to everybody.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll tell them the stories about my older brothers.
Yes, you will. Like, hopefully that'll be like, if you go in, I feel like, so I'm not a parent. I should be very clear about that. I am not a parent. I've been a teacher to hundreds of kids, but never one of my own. So it's hard for me to say, I'd never want to say what a parent should or shouldn't do. But just this idea that going into anything with the idea that it's going to be awkward, it's going to be whatever, trying to like unpack why you have those feelings around it, because hopefully we always do better. Hopefully I do better than what my I think my parents would want that I learned something from them and do better than they did, and so on and so forth. And so something that you learned from your parents maybe was that shame approach isn't
but sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but I bet you also feel like I can't speak for you, but like you speak very highly of your mom, it seems like.
She's fantastic. Yes.
You have what I'm guessing is a, healthy monogamous relationship. I don't know.
Yeah.
The idea then that, so it's not like they did anything terrible to you, we hope.
No.
I've never looked in your freezer. I don't know what's in there.
Well, it's funny that as you're saying that, like, that conversation didn't include my dad.
Isn't that wild?
Which is funny.
My brothers too did not get anything from my dad.
Well, because I never had the conversation with either parent. I remember that one specifically. I remember like walking away from it, like, I'm going to hell. Like, not that she didn't say that, but I was just like, what have I done? Like, that was kind of the feeling of it. But I feel like for my dad, it was always like, he's a boy. Like, he's just like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, he's just like, he's 12. I don't want to know what he's doing. Like, I'm not even going to ask about it. Like, it is what it is.
And he probably
maybe that'll be the same
about it.
No,
right?
Probably
His dad
not,
probably never sat down.
I don't know. I think I'd be too scared to ask that question.
If you do, Can you report back to me?
I think
Because
maybe
I
I'll
would
like,
love that. I would love to hear how your dad found out what sex was.
yeah, I'll be like, I'll call my pop and be like, hey, I know you're 83, but like, what do you think about this?
When was the first time you came across any type of pornography, Dad? Yeah, no, I think it would be wild to know, and I just love hearing how everybody found out. I think everyone has these funny stories,
Yeah.
and so it's so funny that I can't believe no one's done this yet. Like, I can't believe no one has
Yes.
unpacked sex ed, you
Right.
know?
I agree because it's funny that you say that because I don't really have. I remember my friends, like, they would talk about my friend Justin. I'm gonna put his name out there.
Do it.
He talked about like cum. I remember that was like the first time I was like, what is that?
What is
Like
this?
I hadn't gotten to that point yet, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. And but I remember my older brother, he said he was in grade 4 and he was looking at the guy next to him because there's always one boy in every like elementary class that's just talking about boners. It's just what happens. And I guess he was like hunched over in his desk and he like looked at my brother and he's just like, I have a boner right now. Honestly, the way my brother reacted wasn't with disgust. It wasn't with like a weird reaction. It was, that's what they're called. Yeah. So he tells that one quite often around our dinner table. Yes, we have weird dinner conversations. But yeah, that's
I
kind
love
of
that story.
it's hilarious. And so it's
That's
just,
such to learn what a boner is. That's
yeah,
so
but like
cute.
again, like he's 9. Like
Yeah,
really, like
and no one
kind of
told him what you call it whenever your private parts get
and really
stiff.
that's obviously it's erection. It's not like the legitimate term for it,
No,
right?
but
But
I'm
it's
sure
hilarious to
yes.
like that's your introduction to the vocabulary is
Yeah.
hilarious to me. But
No,
yeah,
I
so
love that.
Andrea, I gotta say, I sent you a whole list of questions
We
before,
didn't even
but
talk about any of them.
I was fine. Every boy, and I say boy, I don't know the girl experience, right? Of kind of coming up through that. I feel like I can only imagine it's just caked with so much more shame than boys. I think for the most part, that's pretty much and unfortunately a societal norm. But as for kind of what it is you're trying, like we've talked a lot about sex ed today, weird kind of like coming of age moments and all this kind of stuff flashing back through my mind. And I guess like what is the sex ed with Miss Avery? What do you kind of is it a podcast? You kind of doing content? You're gonna have guests on? Like what's kind of the goal, I guess, of
Yeah.
what you're trying to do?
It's really hard to explain it. I keep calling it just a project. It started off as a stage show. I was trying to make a one-woman
Okay.
show, and I've been sitting on it for about 3 years now.
Mhm.
I've had, all of this content planned. The name Sex Ed with Miss Avery was decided years ago, like all these
Yeah.
different things. But there was just so much red tape around
Mhm.
launching a show. And eventually I was like, look, you got to do something with this idea or someone's going to do it. Like that, like, I feel like I can't believe no one has dove into this yet, So, I decided I grappled with the idea of a podcast and
Mhm.
different things like that. I recently got a digital marketing certificate, and it was a lot about content creation. And I kind of just want to do content creation. I just want to do short form, under 5 minutes for sure,
Mhm.
blips of information and comedy and maybe sketches. Maybe there'll be, stats, and then the next thing there'll be an interview, and then after that maybe I'll be talking to a sex therapist, and then later on we're
Mhm.
talking to a drag queen. Like, I just want a big mishmash, all to do with this overarching idea of sex ed in Canada.
Yep, especially like sex ed and sexuality, because obviously, I mean, I've always kind of had this
Are you coming out?
like,
Oh, sorry.
no. Well, no, I've always had this like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like this just massive acceptance of just like, I'm gonna let you be who you are. I honestly could not care less what you do with your private friends at night. Seriously, could not bother me at all. Like obviously kind of going into the work you're doing. Like I remember at my school, we had like a person in drag come in to kind of give a talk, and it was just like, Like, are the police coming? Like, what? Like, it was like, what? Like, why are we? It shouldn't be that complicated. But so I guess to kind of wrap us up here, this has been an awesome conversation. I definitely do not think this will be the last podcast, and I'm excited to see what you come up with. But I guess to send us off, where can people find you?
Sex Ed with Miss Avery is on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You might find me around Calgary performing some comedy here and there. And in general, I don't know, I'm out there.
I love it. I think the potential for some, again, when doing like the podcast, obviously you start to think about where could this go, and I haven't channeled outside to try to do some comedy stuff yet, but I don't know, maybe we'll see where the wind takes me. But
well, if you ever want to talk comedy, that's another thing I like to geek out about. So sex,
absolutely,
comedy, education, things I love to geek out about.
All right, so comedy and education will be on tap for our next conversation. All right,
Okay,
thank you very much for coming on today, Andrea.
Thanks. Have a great one.